Talking to customers does not mean that you validated your idea. And I learned this the hard way. In my first startup, I had plenty of conversations. People were interested, they nodded, and they said the problem itself was real. But when it came to actually putting down their card and paying for the solution, I got nothing. That taught me something that completely changed the way I validate ideas now. What people say they'll do is almost useless. What matters is what they actually did, what actions they took, and what they're willing to commit to solve the problem. So now, before I build anything, I run a 3-step idea validation playbook. And this framework changed how I validate ideas, and honestly, it would have saved me years of wasted time when I built my first startup. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I validate SaaS ideas with examples of what worked, what didn't, and what I'd do differently if I had to validate a brand new idea today. The biggest mistake founders make in validation is asking people what they would do. Would you use this? Would you pay for this? Does this sound helpful? Unfortunately, these are the type of questions that are almost useless. People are polite. People are optimistic. People like sounding innovative. So they'll tell you that your idea is interesting and they'll do absolutely nothing with it. What I do instead is build structured discovery questions designed to uncover what people actually did. Not opinion, not hypotheticals, not compliments. I want to know what happened the last time this problem came up. How did you handle it? What tools or workarounds do you use today to mitigate or solve the problem? How often does this happen? What did it cost you in time, money, or lost deals? And what breaks if you do nothing? That's the key shift. I'm not trying to get someone to validate my solution or approach them with one in the first place. I'm trying to better understand their current behavior well enough so the problem itself becomes obvious. And then I run that same discovery flow across 5, 10, or even 20 real conversations. Not surveys, not Twitter polls. Actual one-on-one conversations with people who have actually dealt with that specific problem. Because after 10 to 20 conversations, patterns really start to show up and stack up fast. And a whole lot of those patterns are nonverbal cues that you pick up and peel back like an onion to get down to what is the real problem. Either you keep hearing the same messy workaround, the same frustration, or the same pain point. Or you realize that people are experiencing the quote-unquote problem on a daily basis, but in practice, they've done nothing to solve it. Ultimately, if someone hasn't tried spreadsheets, an agency, manual labor, duct tape tools, or some internal workaround to try to solve the problem, there's a pretty decent chance that the pain just isn't strong enough to monetize or chase after in the very first place. For Superdemo, one of the big signals was hearing from other founders and operators about how hard it was to create product demos, to script, and maintain them as their product was changing rapidly. A ton of our interview subjects were spending endless hours scripting, recording, re-recording, messing up, only to have to do it all over again when the product changed. That told me that they weren't just saying demos were painful, they were already burning time and looking at a ton of different workarounds to try and solve it. And that's what you're looking for within discovery. Not interest, but evidence of both pain and behavioral change to solve it. By the way, if you've decided on your SaaS idea and you want it to scale how you demonstrate your product without doing every single product walkthrough live, I'll put a link for my SaaS super demo in the description. Now, back to the video. Once you've confirmed that the problem is real, the next question is whether people will actually commit. And the key word here is commit. Saying someone will use your product is not a commitment. Signing up for a waitlist is honestly barely commitment. Giving feedback on a mock-up is somewhat better, but still not enough. What you really want is that they'll trade something of real value to help solve the problem, because that's the only signal that keeps people honest and to their word. That's why I like testing demand with low fidelity offers before building a full product, even in this AI first age. That could be a landing page with a clear value prop, a paid beta, a refundable deposit, or a design partner agreement. Case in point, if your product is supposed to automate a task, offer to do it manually first instead. If your SaaS is supposed to generate reports, make the reports manually and charge for them. If it's supposed to qualify leads, do the first version yourself. This process achieves 2 things. First, it tells you whether people will actually pay or invest real time. Second, you get closer to experiencing the true pain point, and it teaches you what the product actually needs to do because you're doing the grunt work yourself. That is one of the biggest mistakes that I see founders make. They jump straight into building software before they've even proven the workflow is valuable or painful enough. With Superdemo, we weren't just guessing that interactive demos could solve a real pain point. We had already talked to dozens of customers and seen how limiting live walkthroughs could be. And we'd lived through the bottlenecks ourselves as repeat founders and builders. We had seen the repetition, we've lived through the pain, and we had talked to dozens of other SaaS founders and operators dealing with the exact same problem. So the question for us wasn't, can we imagine a product here? The real question was, will this solve a painful enough workflow that is common enough worldwide that people will actually adopt, pay for it, and at the same time, we can scale into an actually big business. And at this stage, the clear signal is still this. Will a stranger give you time, money, or real effort before the actual polished product exists? That's the bar. And if you can get a handful of people you don't know to commit to a rough, manual, early version of the solution, now you have something worth leaning into. And if you can't achieve this is really valuable information as well. It's not failure. This is cheap information that saves you a whole ton of time, effort, and money chasing the wrong thing, which is frankly the worst case scenario. At this point, you've talked to customers, you've confirmed the problem is real, and you've tested whether people will actually pay. The last decision is whether or not you want to go all in or walk away. Now, I know you've put in weeks of work, you've emotionally invested, and walking away feels like a colossal waste of everything you've already done. But what I have realized and learned from my previous startup is that the sunk cost trap is one of the most expensive mistakes a founder can make. For example, when I built my first company, Coastline Market, we spent years iterating on a business model in a market with bad timing and structural problems that we couldn't control as founders. And every minute and every dollar spent, along with every pivot, felt justified in the moment because we'd already put so much in. But if I could go back, I'd ask myself a much harder question much earlier. Is this a market where timing, conditions, and alignment actually favor what I'm building? Because in that case, the answer would have been a no, and I would have saved years of banging my head against the wall. Now, the signals I look for at the early trenches before committing are very specific. First, are strangers repeatedly converting without you having to beg or plead to convince them? If every sale feels hard to make, the market or the product positioning or the pain point that you're going after might not be the best fit. Or you might just be selling an optional vitamin rather than a painkiller to their true problems. Second, is the market you're entering growing or at least shifting in a way that creates new demand for the solution that you're building? With SuperDemo, the entire SaaS industry was moving towards product-led growth, which meant more companies needed scalable ways to show their product without live demos. And finally, again, AI was making it possible for the first time to automate and simplify the entire product demo creation, editing, and sharing process, from scripting, voiceovers, maintenance, all the way to translations. And going back to the idea validation process, the third point I would really try to stress is, can you articulate the why now? As in, why hasn't this problem been solved? If this problem has existed for 10 years and nobody's ever solved it, the industry or space might be designed that way for a reason. Or if nobody has solved it in a meaningful way, you probably need a credible explanation of what's changed since. New buyer behavior, new distribution, new tech, a market shift, or a pricing shift. Something has to be different. Otherwise, those ideas are what's called a tar pit in a desert, where it looks like a gleaming oasis from afar, but it really sucks you in and sinks you when you try to swim in it. And then there are the kill signals. If your early customers need heavy convincing and constant follow-ups just to use the product, that's not traction. When the people you're selling to keep asking for a solution that's different or divergent from what you're building, you're probably solving the wrong version of the problem. And if you can't clearly explain who this is for and what it replaces, the positioning isn't there yet. Again, going back to a personal example, when I started SuperDemo with my business partner Kaushik, the signals lined up pretty fast. We saw the problem first, we validated it with other companies, and the market was already moving in our direction. And for the first 8 months, it was just the two of us, building and selling, building and selling. And the response told us everything we needed to know. We went from 0 to over 150,000 users and mid-7 figures in ARR. And I genuinely believe that speed of growth came from validating hard before we built or wrote a single line of code. So that's the framework. Don't start by pitching your idea. Start by understanding the pain point and hearing what people actually did. Don't confuse interest with commitment. Test whether people will give you time, money, or effort before you build too much. And don't fall in love with an idea so early that you ignore bad timing or weak signals. That's how I think about validating SaaS ideas today, and that's a much better filter than just asking people whether something sounds useful. And if you're building a product and you want customers to be able to experience what you do without having to sign up, book a demo, or talk to a salesperson across onboarding, sales, enablement, or marketing, I'll link SuperDemo below. And if you want to learn how I use Claude Code to run my SaaS, you can check out this video next.